Okay, we're live now.
Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Pendle Council's Policy and Resources Committee. I think it's the second time we've had a virtual meeting of this committee. My name is David Whip, and in the absence of Councillor Iqbal, the leader of the council, who's involved with a national COVID-19 meeting at the moment, I'm getting the meeting going. Our Chief Executive, Dean Langton, is also involved with that national call, and he will be joining us shortly as well. To begin the meeting, I'm going to go through a roll call of the councillors who should be present, just to make sure that everything is working okay. I see that Councillor Iqbal has joined us, so I'll be handing over the chairmanship to him in a minute. But I'm assuming that the children I can hear in the background may well be due to him. We'll do the roll call and then we'll see who's here and who isn't. So I've got Councillor Ahmed.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Arshad. Not here. Councillor Clegg.
Present.
Councillor Coburn-Price.
Here.
Councillor Cooney. Councillor Cooney, not present as yet.
He is trying. He's sending us messages.
Very good. Councillor Goulthorpe.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Apologies, Councillor Henderson.
Okay. Councillor Iqbal.
I'm here, David.
Very good. I'll do this and then I'll hand over to you. Councillor Mahmood. Oh no, apologies. I see. Councillor Newman. Councillor Newman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Here.
Thank you. And myself, I've got Councillor Aslam.
Yes.
Councillor Hanif.
Yes.
And Councillor Saqib.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, if you are not, if you haven't been called to speak, please put your microphone on mute, and then it doesn't cause problems with the running of the meeting. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Iqbal now.
Cheers.
Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you very much for that, David, and appreciate you starting the meeting. Just to share with colleagues, as David has said, I've just been in and Dean is still there for a few more minutes in terms of a national meeting with government around the COVID-19 situation, because earlier this morning we had a conversation with government civil servants who indicated that they wanted Pendle to implement not opening our leisure services at all, as is programmed on the 25th of July. I strongly objected to that because, you know, the work that some of you people back home have been doing is fantastic to bring our figures down. But there's been a meeting convened literally 15 minutes ago, because I understand the minister is going to be making an announcement shortly. We were told 2 o'clock, but I don't know whether it started appearing, hence the reason that Dean's there. And I once again have said to the government officials that, as far as I'm concerned, Pendle should not be forced to close any leisure services. If anything, if government are insisting on closing leisure services to try and restrict COVID-19, that has to be across the county. So I've made my feelings known on behalf of colleagues across the chamber, but ultimately it's going to be government ministers' decisions very, very shortly. So we'll have to watch this space. In terms of the actual meeting, just to help me, when it comes to voting, I've asked Jane and Dean to do the voting call. So Jane, until Dean joins us, will kindly help me when it comes to voting to call out people's names. Before I move on to item 1, David, you indicated you'd like to speak.
Yes, thanks, Iqbal. I am really appalled that the leisure centres in Pendle are being told not to open this next week. We've seen a consistent fall in the infection rates in Pendle through COVID-19 over the last couple of weeks, and the position in Pendle is no worse than many other parts of the country. It's utterly inconsistent to demand such action here in Pendle. And given the inconsistency of treatment of different sectors, I mean, we see the pubs where social distancing is, so I'm not saying everywhere, but in some pubs, social distancing appears to be non-existent. People are going up to the bar, and how you can sort of contrast that sort of activity with the highly regulated regime of a gym or a swimming pool where people have to book in for their activities, it just beggars belief. And I do think the government need to get the act together as to what their expectations are, to be clear about what they expect people to do, because confusion is now ruling. It's not only ruling in Pendle, it's ruling across the country, and it's time they got the finger out and got stuck into doing something proper instead of, well, faffing around and making things worse.
The pushback that I had from those comments that I made earlier to colleagues was that my understanding is, and this will come out in the next half hour or so, is that they're saying that we're not doing enough testing, and ultimately they want every single person in Pendle tested, which is fine. I don't disagree with that, but to put draconian measures in and not allow us the opportunity and the resources to do that, I think is unfair. Nadeem, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Iqbal. I agree with a lot of what yourself and David have said, but just like clarification in terms of the saying about the leisure facilities in Pendle. What's the position in, say, Blackburn?
Well, I've made it clear that, Blackburn and Pendle were going to be singled out, and I said that's not right, that's not fair, because it's very easy. If you're, for example, a member of Pendle Wavelengths and Pendle Leisure Services, you can use the card to go to a Burnley gym, a Rosendale gym, a Hindburn gym. So all that's going to happen is people are just going to drive to Burnley, and that's where the system is wrong. So before I signed off on the call to government, I said, look, if you're insisting on doing this, but I object, and as far as I'm aware, other East Lancashire leaders are also going to register their protest. You have to do it on an East Lancashire footprint, because otherwise it's not going to work. So that's my understanding until the moment that I signed off. I mean, Dean might have something extra when he joins us, but I'm just sharing with you things as they were at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I think that's the point I was going to make, because if it's just Pendle, like you said, it's not going to work. So it has to be across the board for it to have any effect. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Hanif, you indicated to speak.
Yeah, thank you. My concern is that they're just asking Pendle Leisure to close. What about all the private gyms we have? They're all going to be open. So where's the logic in that? If they're going to do it, then they're going to do it for everybody across the patch, all the centres. I mean, I don't agree with that anyway. But if they're going to do it, it's going to be a standard, not just ask our leisure centres to close and everybody else, the private ones, to be open. Yeah.
Okay, if I just help you there, Hanif, the indication from government is that they will ask all leisure services to close. So whether they're publicly owned gyms or privately owned gyms, it applies to everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Don't have any other hands up. So I'll move on to the agenda. There's item 4A, which is the planning application at Bailey Street. Just for colleagues' benefit, that application has been withdrawn from this agenda. Because back in March, I think when we last met, or February or January, we agreed to do a site visit. That's clearly not happened because of social distancing. So we're going to have a discussion with Pearl on that anyway, but that's been withdrawn from this particular agenda. In terms of speakers, we have no speakers on any items. So I'll move on to declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest they'd like to declare? Nadeem, you've still got your hand up. I don't know whether you're declaring or... No, he's put it down. That's fine. Okay, item...
Iqbal.
Saqib?
Yeah, on the tenders, I'm one of the builders who have won one of the tenders, so I'd like to declare interest in that item, please.
Fine. Well, you can leave the meeting by that time then, Saqib, if that'll be, it's the last item anyway. Okay,
Yeah.
item 2 is public question time. Jane, I'm not aware if any members of the public have joined us to ask any questions. If you can help me.
No, we've no members of the public at this meeting.
That's fine. Thank you very much for that. Item 3 are the minutes of the last meeting held back on the 25th of June. I'll move those from the chair. Is everybody happy? Yeah, nobody's indicating they're not. Okay, next one is the planning application that's been referred from Conan District Committee for the restarting of a temporary single-storey agricultural workers at Cowfield Farm in Trawden. Is Neil on the call, Jane?
Yes, he is.
Chairman,
Neil,
yes, I am. Yeah.
Do you want to help us in terms of this application? Any comments before I bring people in?
Chairman, I think it's covered in the report. What I would just advise committee members who weren't at Cone, this has been a subject of an appraisal by some independent consultants we engaged, ADAS, to look at whether there is an agricultural need. Based on the information we've got from the applicants, they have agreed that there isn't a need now, but this is for a 3-year period for them to try and grow the business. I know that it's been a while ago since the initial appraisal came in, but that's because of appeals, etc. Chairman, and I would also point out to members that this has also been tested at appeal, where a planning inspector earlier this year concluded that on the evidence before him, he saw no reason why there wasn't an agricultural justification to support a temporary consent. So, Chairman, that's my concern here. We've got independent verification via ADAS. We have a decision by an inspector who's indicating that in his view there is an agricultural need. Obviously, Cone Committee, in my view, without appropriate evidence, decided to refuse it on lack of need. And Chairman, that's I would advise committee to think carefully about what evidence we have. I know there's all kinds of rumours around this, but it's what the evidence is before us. Thank you, Chairman.
Oops. That's fine. Thank you for that, Neil. Sarah, I've got your hand up to speak.
Hello, it's my ward, so obviously I have sat through all of the parish council meetings, and I won't go into any of the backgrounds that Neil referred to, which is sometimes unhelpful from a planning perspective. But if we look at the sequence of events here, the selling of the Tide Agricultural House was in 2014, and the start was made on the building an open countryside without planning permission. That was 6 years ago, and the report was written by the consultant 2 years ago in 2018. People within the farming community in Trawden say that while it is possible that this report makes the farming, I've seen the report and read it thoroughly, it's various very intensive farming practices on 74 acres to try to make a viable business. So the timeline is 6 years ago, temporary building in open countryside without planning permission, and that was a little bit before that, the sale of the agricultural Tide building to the farm. And then 2 years ago, we have the viability report for a future business. And I just merely said that the applicant, could choose to live in Trawden, which he lives in Briarfield. And he could have made a start, at least on some elements of the business. And as far as I understand, currently all the 74 acres is let to other farmers. So in this long, it is a saga. I shan't give you the full blow by blow, but in this saga, we have got no start on this business. So what we've got is a potential business, and we could allow this temporary building to be erected for a potential business which doesn't exist as it currently stands. And I just ought to also mention that although it's reasonable as a temporary building, which is what this application is, it would not be reasonable in a conservation area as a permanent building. And my concern, and I'd be very interested to hear what Neil has to say, he's spoken to me privately on it, but my concern is the very presence of the building for 3 years gives it some level of permanence in 3 years' time. And therefore, you could say, potentially, is a loophole under the MPPF to build a building in a conservation area that's non-compliant, that if we were looking at a permanent building today, we would absolutely, we wouldn't be discussing it because it would have been knocked back ages ago. So that really is the quick synopsis of quite a saga.
Okay, so are you moving anything, Sarah, at this stage?
Well, I would like to hear what Neil has to say about the juxtaposition of the complexity of removing this building in 3 years' time, because actually it's not as straightforward as it might seem. And certainly in terms of looking at how viable this business is or isn't. And may I just stress again, this business does not exist.
Okay, thanks for that, Sarah. Before I bring Councillor Brian Newman in, Neil, do you want to just help Sarah and the rest of us?
Yes, Chairman. It's not uncommon to have temporary structures which wouldn't be acceptable in the landscape and in conservation areas. So applicants aren't taken to the expense of building something new and then we're getting something permanent that can't be altered. The whole purpose of something that's temporary is to facilitate the applicant trying to make that business work. And I agree with Councillor Coburn-Price. I think it is very intensive and it will take some doing this. But in terms of the conservation area, I would agree that this isn't a permanent long-term solution, even were the business to become viable in 3 years' time. We will be seeking something of a better design, but on a temporary basis, in order to facilitate the business and in order to facilitate them trying to get a viable business, Chairman, I think we can live with the temporary impact of what would eventually be an inappropriately designed building.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Brian, you've indicated to speak.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Well, my concern is that 70 odd acres of land is not a viable proposition to put a worker's cottage. So I don't think this is a viable thing at all. There is some other alternative motive to this one, and that's my concern. Okay.
Okay, but I think refusing something just on what we think is going to happen, I don't think a valid planning ground unless Neil can correct me. But Sarah, you've indicated to come back in, so I'll allow you to come back in.
Yeah, Neil didn't quite answer my question. I would like him to sort of go over, if at all possible, the sequence of events, because when Neil spoke to me about, let's just fast forward ourselves to 3 years' time, what are our exact powers to really look into, and I want to say again, he's had 6 years to start this business doesn't exist. What are our powers to really look into, yes or no, this is a viable business, or it isn't? And also, what are our powers to say, right, you've had your 3 years, it is a viable business, but now it's not, it's in contravention of the conservation area, and it's got to go. I would really like to fully understand that mechanism.
Okay, I'll bring Neil in a second, if that's okay. Mike's indicated he'd like to speak, so I'll take Mike first. Mike? Councillor Mike Goldthorpe?
Yes, I'm just trying to get my fingers to work, Chairman.
I can hear you, Mike.
On the unmuting. Thank you, Chairman. It's two areas, really. Having been in agriculture most of my life, at the other end of it, not at the hard working end of it, I was surprised that 74 acres would be viable, particularly in this part of the world, even for a full-time situation. However, the question really is for Neil, when you had the report commissioned, and it was done two years ago, was any view taken about the viability of this area vis-a-vis the massive changes that are going to take place over the next 18 months, 2 years anyway, through Brexit? The whole concept is going to get turned upside down in terms of how marginal lands in this part of the world and in a lot of hill farming areas are going to actually find their income coming from. So I wonder if there was anything in the report that marked that as an issue going forward, or is it about where they were at the time?
I mean, Neil will correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. I don't think there is anything in the report, and I've not seen it, that talks about that. But I'll bring Neil in. Neil, if you want to just respond in terms of what Sarah and Mike have raised, and then we'll try and progress this.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Councillor Coburn-Price talks about the history to this, and there was an agricultural workers dwelling on there. Chairman, I don't want to go into too much about that history because there are personal details involving divorce, etc. But that was severed off, and we have investigated that and the reasons behind that. And Chairman, the applicant and previous appellant have provided case law to say how we should deal with those once those personal circumstances are in place. So if that was tied to the holding, yes, we could take that on board. But Chairman, the history of that means that it has been severed. There's now saying that there is a change in circumstances over the last 3 years, really. But Chairman, one of the reasons, and I was in the hearing on this, why they haven't got on with this, and I could, again, two sides of the coin, they're saying that how can we invest when there's no certainty? We need to be on site to carry on and have some certainty in the investment. So, Chairman, it's a bit of chicken and egg, I suppose, in if you forgive the pun, in a farming context. Chairman, in terms of 3 years' time, as we have done with the current location of the building, if the information, the evidence does not support that this is a going concern, a viable enterprise, we can refuse and serve an enforcement notice. Clearly, there are powers of appeal on that, but as we have done for the existing site, we can force the removal of that. Chairman, in terms of Brexit, I understand the concern. I think it concerns us all where we will be. I think the answer to the impacts of that won't be through me trying to second guess or crystal ball gaze it in a planning report. It will be in 3 years' time. Will that have impacted on how they say the business will operate? And at that time, we can get audited accounts. We can get actual, more corroborated information instead of what is in effect now a business plan. So I think there are safeguards in there to say that we can assess it in more detail at the time, because we would expect audited accounts, invoices, all that kind of information to be readily available to us.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. I mean, unless there's any other speakers, and Mike, you still got your hand up, and Brian, I assume you don't want to speak, you just want to take them down. Thanks for that. I mean, in terms of the report, I've read the report, and the conditions, I think, are quite strongly worded from our officers. And Neil's additional information today, I think, gives me enough confidence to move the recommendations as set out. So I'm happy to move that we approve the application as set out. I'm going to look for a second if somebody wants to stick their hand up. And we're going to stick their hand up. Jane, can you see anybody or somebody wants to speak? Just bear with me.
Yeah, Councillor Hanif.
Hanif seconded me. Okay. So, Jane, is there any amendment to that, or is everybody content that we go to the vote now? Yeah, Sarah's nodding her head, so I'll take that as a yes. We'll go to the vote. Jane, can you do the honours for me, please, and just do the voting to approve?
Yes, I will do. If you're in favour of approval, please say for. If you're against, say against. Councillor Ahmed.
Against.
Councillor Aslam.
Against.
Councillor Clegg.
Against.
Councillor Coburn-Price.
Against.
Councillor Cooney.
Against.
Councillor Mark Goldthorpe.
Against.
Councillor Hanif,
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal,
For.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal, for. Councillor Newman,
Against.
Councillor Nixon,
Against.
Councillor Sakib,
Against.
Councillor Whip,
Abstain.
So I think the against is in the majority there, Jane, without you tossing it up.
It is, yes, that was
So
lost.
do we have to give reasons for it, for the against, Neil, in case there's an appeal, or?
Chairman, do we not have to vote on the reasons for, because we've not approved it, but is there not now a motion to refuse based on those reasons you want to refuse it on? Because they haven't been given in that decision.
Okay, so can I ask one of those colleagues that voted for the refusal to then formally move the refusal and give us the grounds for refusal, and then we can vote on that? Somebody want to stick their hand up? Sarah?
I can't quite remember what we agreed when we did this at Kona Area Committee. I think it was to do with the business viability and the conservation area, was it not? I don't know. Yeah, I'm afraid you'll have to remind me.
Chairman, it was just on lack of agricultural need.
Right, okay.
So, Sarah, you're moving refusal on the grounds of lack of agricultural need, I assume?
Well, yes, I am.
Okay. Is that seconded? If somebody can indicate, please. Or speak. I've got Mike Goldthorpe. Are you seconding that, Mike? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. Jane, do you want to do the honours again? So we're now voting on the refusal as moved by Councillor Corbyn-Price.
Okay, the same again. If you're for the refusal, say for. If you're against the refusal, say against. Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Aslam.
For.
Councillor Clegg.
For.
Councillor Corbyn-Price.
For.
Councillor Cooney.
For.
Councillor Goldthorpe.
For.
Councillor Hanif.
Abstain.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Nixon.
For.
Councillor Sakib.
For.
Councillor Whip. Councillor Whip.
I'm abstaining. I'm busy dealing with the announcement about sports centres on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's been refused.
Okay, thanks for that, Jane. David, can I just ask, in terms of, I've just had a message from the other meeting that the government have said they're not going to do anything based on the protests that we've just had. So you might want to just delete some of the posting, I've been asked. Okay, thanks for that, colleagues. I'll move on to item 5, which is the capital programme, the provisional outturn. I'm not sure whether Dean has joined us. Jane, can you help me?
Chairman, it's Vince on the call.
Oh, hiya, Vince. Thank you for that. Vince.
Councillors.
Thank you. Can you just introduce this item?
Thank you,
Please,
Chairman,
Vince.
and good afternoon, members. It's just it's our normal year-end report on the Council's capital programme. What the report does is to summarise the expenditure in the year, which you'll note totals just over £3 million. That's set in the context of a far greater capital programme budget. You're in effect being asked to approve slippage, which is the carry forward of that unspent budget, totalling nearly £14 million to this financial year, 2021. Happy to take any questions on the report, but before I do, there's just 2 items that I'd really like to highlight. So one on grounds of transparency, really, which is linked to the High Ropes loan for Pendle Leisure Trust. Members will see in the report that we've had to take certain action in closing the accounts down for last year, and we consider the balance outstanding on that loan to be impaired. So we have in effect had to write that loan out of the accounts. And I just wanted to notify and inform members of that. There is a slight error in the report. It refers to a loan of 210,000. It should be a loan of 220,000, but the balance that has been written out of the accounts is, as per the report, at 147,000. The second item I'd just like to highlight is obviously slippage is significant. You know, in the context of the budget, carrying forward nearly 14 million is extremely significant for a council the size of Pendle. But a large component of that, of course, is the 5 million that council agreed in September for the property investment strategy. And I'm sure, you know, members will understand that the financial and commercial landscape has changed quite a lot in recent months as a consequence of COVID. So I don't think it will come as any surprise, really, that there hasn't been any movement in connection with that £5 million. Council hasn't spent anything, it hasn't borrowed in connection with that. And it's pleasing to report, in terms of financing the programme for last year, there hasn't been any further prudential borrowing in support of that programme. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thanks for that, Vince, and appreciate you stepping in to help us. I mean, just in terms of obviously the report, and Vince is right that when council approved the budgets and back in February for this year, and when we were looking back to last year, I don't think any of us would have envisaged being where we are today. And going forward, there is that much uncertainty that I think it's wise at this stage for us to pause of where we are. And clearly, once government have indicated how they're going to help councils like ours in terms of the funding around COVID, I think only at that stage we'll be in a real position to ascertain where our capital programme and what have you is. So before, I'm not going to move anything. I'm just happy at this stage to take questions. And I've got Councillor David Whip, followed by Councillor Mike Goldthorpe, and then Saqib has indicated. So David, you're first.
Well, I wasn't going to ask any questions, Chairman. I was just going to move that we accepted the report and the recommendations contained within it.
Thanks for that. I'm happy to second that at this stage. Mike Goldthorpe.
Chair, yeah, sorry, Chair. I was just going to say a very similar thing to what David Whipps just said. So I'm happy to proceed and support the report.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. Saqib.
Yeah, it's a concern rather than a question, Mr. Chairman. Under bullet point 9, disabled facility grants, it says underspent of just over £1 million. My worry is that just in case if the following year Lancashire County Council will not give us as much money because we're not able to spend the money. So it's just a concern. If this can be passed on to the department, that's sufficient.
Okay. Vince, do you want to just comment on what Saqib has said?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate it is a significant sum that's being carried forward in terms of the grants. Obviously, the scale of the grant that the council has benefited from in recent years has also grown substantially. There is a lead in time in terms of disabled facility grants, particularly on the larger schemes. But I do note the concerns, and I will ensure those concerns are passed to the service department concerned, Chairman.
Okay, and then Vince, if you can ask the service department to update colleagues. I mean, we're in, what month are we now? July. We can have an update from around October or November to see where we are in terms of that particular budget, please.
Certainly, Chairman. I'll pass that on.
Thank you. I have no indication from any other members to speak. So rather than taking a roll call of who's for and against, I assume there's cross-party support on the recommendations. Is there anybody that's against the recommendations? If you can speak now, and then Jane can just note that, otherwise it's a unanimous decision. No, that's fine. Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Item 6 is the provisional revenue outturn. Vince, is this you again?
It is indeed, Chairman. Thank you very much. It is really a case of what we explained, I think, when Dean introduced the medium-term financial update at your last meeting in June. Dean, in the course of speaking on that report, signposted that the underspend looked to be of the magnitude of £500,000, and that has been confirmed. And you'll see from this report that the underspend for last year is £520,000. As a consequence, we've been able to take less out of the budget strategy reserve. £500,000 is not insignificant in the context of Pendle's scale, but clearly that's in relation to last year, and the council faces a very, very different challenge currently in this financial year as a consequence of COVID-19. You are being asked as part of the report, Chairman, to approve 2 items of slippage, which is where service departments are asking you to approve the carry forward of budget, and you'll see those referred to in paragraph 8. They form part of slippage proposals, the bulk of which have been agreed under officer delegation, but that only extends up to sums up to £15,000. Sums in excess of £15,000 need the approval of members. So as part of the report, you are being asked to agree to those items of slippage. Perhaps more significantly, in terms of a forward look, really, we need to obviously be mindful in terms of the financial implications of COVID-19. Dean, I think in the medium-term financial plan update that you received in June, outlined for you the impacts as we understand them currently on the council. And in that context, obviously £500,000 underspend is not unhelpful, but it clearly won't go any way towards meeting the expected costs currently. Just to share with members that we do make a return to government on a regular basis linked to financial implications of COVID-19, and the next one is due at the end of this month, Chairman.
Okay, thanks for that, Vince. And just in terms of updating where we are in terms of funding for COVID-19, I'm grateful to both Councillor Whip and Councillor Ahmed for the support that they've given me as leader to lobby government that all we're asking for is for government to honour the promise that they made to us back in March that they would reimburse Pendle for every penny that we spent around COVID-19. That work is still ongoing. We'll continue to lobby on a cross-party basis, but clearly, members will be updated as and when the pounds start rolling in. But for the purpose of the report, I'm happy to move the recommendations as set out. Do I have a seconder?
Well, Chairman, I want to propose something slightly different, but you may well accept that as part of the resolution. Before I come on to that, can I just make some general comments? Because the savings that we made in last financial year are not inconsiderable. There's a significant level of saving that's been achieved there, and I'd like to pay tribute to all the council staff and indeed councillors who, through the budget working group this last year, have helped to make decisions which have ended up with us saving money, and these have been sensible savings without any cuts in the level of services that's been provided. And so a big thank you on that score. Clearly, with the impact of COVID-19, the need to get a balanced budget in very uncertain times, that is difficult. We got a list at our last policy resources meeting of the potential cuts that could come down the line if we don't get sufficient funding from government. So it is absolutely crucial that the government does put its money where its mouth is, and that we can see that funding coming through to support services here in Pendle. The consequences otherwise are absolutely horrific. But what my suggestion is, Chairman, that I hope can be incorporated within the resolution is to do with COVID-19 recovery for retail businesses in town centres. We have a sum of money, that's been allocated by government, and that's been distributed around via area committees to local townships. In my case, the area committee has put a bit of capital funding in there to help as well. But the government funding is restricted in what it can be used for. The area committee's capital programmes are restricted in what they can be used for. And we have a gap where it really does need some revenue support to allow things to be done. Otherwise, they're not allowed by one fund, they're not allowed by another fund. So my suggestion is that from the underspend, we allocate £35,000 towards that reopening of town centres, and that we decrease the amount that is coming out of the reserves. Coming out of the reserves. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting muddled now. But you get.
I get your gist.
Yeah, so we get the £35,000. We adjust the reserve position as a consequence, and that is allocated around the area committees on the same basis as we allocated the funding from government. So if you're prepared to take that on board, I'll second the proposal and take that as a resolution. Just on the gyms and sports centres, Chairman, I've updated the post with the latest information that you've supplied. If you've got any further updates, I'll keep on updating.
Okay, I'm happy to accept what you've suggested, and I've just noticed our illustrious chief executive has stuck his hand up as well. No doubt to give some information on the earlier meeting, Dean. But I'll bring in at the end of this debate. Is there anything you want to say in terms of what we're talking about, the revenue outturn? Dean?
Yeah, it's just perhaps a moot technical point on what Councillor Whip has said. I think if you're minded to find £35,000, we'll do it out of this year. And when it's gone into reserves, we'll take it out of this year's reserves. It's just a moot technical point, so we don't have to rewrite the statement of accounts, if that's okay. If you leave that to us.
Chairman, I'm more than happy with that. Yeah.
That's fine. I've got Brian Newman, your hand is up. Brian, are you wanting to speak, or is your hand still up from previously? Brian, no, he's not speaking. Nadeem, you've indicated to speak.
Just a general point in terms of where we are and where we have been and where we are going to be in the future, which obviously none of us know at this moment in time because of all the uncertainty. I think we have faced huge challenges over a couple of years, and going forward, because of the current pandemic, we're not sure in terms of the funding allocation and where we're going to be. So I think it is important for all groups on the council to try as best we can. I know it's not always easy and we have to make just difficult choices and decisions, but as best we can to try and work together, as we have done in the previous year, to try and come to an agreement on some of the bigger budget issues. And then obviously we always have certain issues which we can't agree on, but I think if we do continue to work together, I think that would be helpful for us moving forward.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Can you just bear with me 1 second, guys? Sorry, there's a badminton tournament going on in our front garden. So in terms of the recommendations, I'm happy to accept what Councillor Whip suggested. Is there anybody against the recommendations? Otherwise, we're all content. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Before I move on to item 7, Dean, can you just give us an update? I mean, when I left the meeting, I updated colleagues that government were about to implement closure of leisure services from Saturday. I understand you might have some more breaking news to share with us.
So it was the case, in fact, that it was a discussion around the proposition of, and I think the case was well made that Pendle's, yes, it has had a spike in relation to the number of cases it's had, but equally the numbers are coming down. What we're looking at doing is doing more mass testing of people to try to push out any of the virus, but there are now no proposals to not allow leisure centres to reopen in Pendle, Pennine, Lancashire or Lancashire. So
Excellent.
that's not now
Excellent.
happening.
That's fine.
That
Common
said,
sense.
of course, sorry, I should say, of course, what we will be doing is more testing, and if more testing leads to more positive tests, then the council and the government and Pennine, whatever, may have to reconsider that. So it is not without its risks, but the numbers at the moment are what they are. I just think it's one of those things where we've got to test people more so than we are doing now, get the rate of testing up, just to determine whether it is in the community or not.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for that, Dean. David, you wanted to indicate, and I'll allow you to speak, and then I'll move on to the next item.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's good news that they have backed down on this. And I think given the juxtaposition of the situation in gyms and leisure centres and that in pubs, where, you know, it's very, very difficult to balance one against the other. But the testing question, I mean, with yourself, Chairman, and the Chief Executive, I mean, in the recent weeks, we battled to get additional testing into Pendle, and you know that's not been easy. So how on earth the government can now be saying, well, there needs to be, you know, sort of mass testing? Yeah, well, give us resources, and I'm sure we will facilitate mass testing. You know, we've found sites for the mobile test units. You know, we'll bend over backwards, but you know, I'm sorry, they just seem to be, well, yeah, they just seem to be unreasonable. I'll just use the word unreasonable because the actual thoughts are much worse than that.
Yeah, fine. I'll bring Nadeem in a second. But I think the pushback from us today, David and colleagues, has been, look, we're more than happy to do extra testing. And, you know, clearly I would much rather people be tested and helped if it's testing positive rather than not being tested at all. But the pushback from us to the government has been over a number of weeks now is, you're right, give us the resources and we'll do the testing, working with the army and what have you. But they can't just say, look, do more testing and not give us the resources. I've got Nadeem first, and then Dean, you want to come back.
Yeah, thank you. I think in terms of the spike which we referred to and what it led to in terms of us making the headlines and the concern of the potential further restrictions here in Pendle, I think the government are quite right to raise them concerns, and the health authorities and us as Pendle Council to raise them concerns, because it was worrying, and unless them figures started to come down, which they have done, which is good news, we could have potentially faced further restrictions. So I think the government were absolutely correct, and the council and the health authorities, to have these discussions and discuss in terms of, I mean, the discussion about the gyms and the leisure facilities generally today. I think that was, as Ian mentioned, was just a proposition. I think it was a discussion. I don't think they were actually saying, yes, we are closing our leisure facilities. I think, can I just confirm that before I go further, Dean? Was it just a proposition, or did they just come out and say, we are closing the leisure facilities?
Dean, if you just want to update Nadeem and others then in terms of where the conversation was this morning and where it's got to.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a decision taken. It was a matter for consideration, taking advice from the Director of Public Health, both in Blackburn and in Lancashire. The question about whether it was a Lancashire matter or a Pennine Lancashire matter or just a Pendle matter. I think our response to that was, this can't just be a Pendle matter, because, of course, the boundaries, the virus doesn't respect the boundaries of individual boroughs. And one of our concerns, if that were to be the case, because we have the Activo card, our people can just go to Burnley, can go to Hyndburn, to Rossendale, and that can't be the case. But equally, the numbers aren't suggesting that that kind of measure is necessary at this stage. What we do need to do, and we have been pushing for, and in fairness, the government has responded, is for more testing to be done. We've had 2 MTUs, mobile testing units in Pendle, in the last couple of days. That's 2 out of the 6 in the north in Lancashire. So we've had more testing, and we need to do more testing in the same way that Blackburn have done more testing. And it's better to get people tested. That's the stance I've taken to determine whether they have got the disease or not, because that will then help the population deal with that accordingly. So I think that's the right thing to do more testing, and that's the measures that we're getting towards in response to what was happening. We had a spike, we've responded to that, we've got a plan in place to deal with it, and the view is that the measures of closing down, not allowing leisure centres to open, is perhaps a step too far. But let me tell you, more testing may lead to more positives. Yeah, and those measures may come at some point in any event. So don't think we're there yet in terms of dealing with this matter, because we're far from it, really. And I put into context the numbers. We've got relatively small numbers of people who have contracted COVID. We've got 530 people, say, versus other places like Blackburn, where they've had 1,200 people, Leicester have had 4,500 people. So the numbers are small in our case, but equally so is the level of testing. So we need to up the rate of testing to flush it out, and that may lead to other measures further down the line.
Okay, Nadeem, you wanted to come back? Yeah, sure. I'll let you finish and then I'll move on.
Please, can I thank yourself, Dean, and Councillor Iqbal as leader for lobbying on behalf of Pendle. So that's much appreciated. But I think going back in terms of the testing, I agree that's welcomed, and I think it just goes to show if we do talk it is a two-way conversation. If we do talk, the government are listening to some extent. They are listening, and if we have this increased testing, that's again credit where credit's due. We have to accept the good things and acknowledge that when it does happen. So that is a step forward. But I accept what you're saying, Dean, in terms of the potential risk. High testing could potentially lead to more positive cases, could lead to potentially some further restrictions coming back in. But Dean, can I go back in a general point in terms of, I've just had 3 messages now saying to me, why are Pendle Council closing gyms? Why are you not letting us open? Can I just make a general point in terms of the messages we are sending out in terms of Pendle Council? Because people are genuinely concerned and worried about their businesses, it's their livelihood. And if messages are going out, I'm not having a go at any particular person, but if messages are going out saying one thing when it's not actually happened, people are extremely, extremely concerned. So can we have, in terms of the media messages that we are sending out in terms of Pendle Council, that they are consistent and we're all saying the same thing?
Chairman, as far as I'm concerned, the council hasn't issued any statement on this matter.
That's fine. Okay, we'll move on to We'll move on. Nadeem, I said I'll give you the last word. I don't want a further debate on this, but the council hasn't issued any press releases. I mean, if it helps, we'll issue something after this meeting just to confirm the outcome of that particular meeting, which I think will help people that are messaging you.
No, it's not about people messaging me. If for example, I'm going to have to be, I don't want to say, but if the deputy leader is sending messages out there saying, breaking news, gym's closing, of course people could be concerned. That's the point I'm making. Okay, I know people want to have a debate, but guys, we've got an agenda to continue. I allowed Dean to come in just to update us. So I'm going to move on to item 7, which is Lancashire Industrial Estate. Is Julie on the call? Is Julie
Julie's on leave this week, so right. I think it's down to me to take it.
Julie's deputy.
That's the one. So the report just provides members with an update on the funding position for Lancashire Industrial Estate. Members may recall that we received a funding allocation from the growth deal of £4 million for the delivery of Lancashire Extension Phase 2. As members, I think, are well versed with, that particular project is in the hands of a private owner, and we did not come to an agreement on how the funding would be used on that particular part of the site. So we entered into discussions with the LEP about how we could use the funding for other projects within Pendle to make sure that the money didn't go back into the pot and get redistributed elsewhere. So we came to an agreement that £1.5 million of the £4 million would go into Phase 1 to match the County Council's funding, and that would free up £1.5 million that this council had put in, and that we would then, with agreement with the LEP and the County Council, be able to reinvest into projects within Pendle. So that's we thought was a good outcome. And equally, the balance of £2.5 million would go into the delivery of an additional part of Northlight, formerly Briarfield Mill. And that the business case for that was approved yesterday by the Growth Deal Management Board. So we're at risk of losing the £4 million back to the left. We've sought to keep all of that money for projects within Pendle, and this report gives you an update on that and seeks agreement to enter into the various agreements to make sure that that funding gets used.
Okay, thanks for that, Dean. I mean, clearly that's a positive outcome in terms of where we could have been. That, you know, the money that was destined for Pendle could have gone elsewhere, but clearly the LEP have listened to our lobbying, and you know, a positive outcome has been received. So I'm going to move the report as set out. I have David. Hold on, David. I've got David, then Saqib, and then Brian to speak. So David.
Only to second the recommendations, Chairman, and to comment that the freeing up of this resource for job creation, economic development activities across the borough is something that we welcome.
Okay, thanks for that. Saqib? Saqib? Are you there, Saqib?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I unmuted it. Just like to know what will happen with the further opportunity to apply for any.
Sorry, Saqib, we can't hear you. I can't hear you, and I'm far away. I don't know about anybody else.
The £4 million, the funding we had obviously for phase 2, will there be further opportunity to apply for such funding?
We're utilising opportunities every single day of the week, 7 days a week. I've got Dean working at the moment. So wherever there's funding opportunities, and we've made the case to the LEP previously that if there's slippage in other parts of Lancashire, we will be ready to line up projects to deliver in Pendle. So as you can see, Dean's got bags under his eyes by working on a 24/7 rota at the moment. So yeah, we're not going to let any opportunities slip. Brian, Councillor Brian Newman, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I would like just to say Dean is spot on with this, and I would definitely approve what he's saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, colleagues. Again, is there anybody that's against the recommendations? If you want to speak now, otherwise I'll take it that everybody's happy. No, everybody happy? Thank you for that. Next item is the Town Deal boundary extension. The report is there from Julie. This was discussed at the Town Deal Board to expand the boundary of the Town Deal. So as Vice Chairman of the Town Deal and Chair of this committee, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we extend the Town Deal Board, because I think the boundary will help Nelson in terms of the Town Deal funding that we will hopefully receive. I'm looking for a seconder. Nadeem?
Can I just ask a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Can I ask, in terms of just a general starting point, why are we including this new area within the boundary?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, Dean, go on.
Yeah, probably for two reasons. One, to maximise our opportunities with the use of funding, so that we've got we've included two of the industrial estates where, whilst we don't think necessarily that we need any more investment in there, what we don't want to do is take it to a point where we exclude those, but may need then to invest it through the Town Deal. Bear in mind that the town is in its broadest sense. We need to look at it rather than just the town centre, but the town as a broader urban area, but adding on these industrial estates. So again, the discussion about white walls, why is a bit of cone in there, is because it's if there are opportunities that arise in there, and we want to use this as a potential source of funding, then at least it's there. There would be a decision for the Town Deal Board, but at least we have the opportunity. If we don't include it, then that opportunity doesn't exist. Equally, if we're able to create more outputs by including those areas as well, to actually make the business case for the town deal agreement, then that will make it better when we make that submission to the government. I'm not suggesting they'll have any bearing on this. What I don't want to do is cut off our opportunities for doing that.
Can I follow that with another question? But this funding is for Nelson, yet we're including Colne in this. What would, in terms of, if we put an application with including another area, which isn't part of Nelson, I would have thought they'll knock it back anyway.
Yeah, you're right. It is for Nelson, but Nelson, of course, isn't an island. Nelson sits within parts of, the bigger part of Penrith. So, for example, we've got in there, in the plan, potentially, things like a better rail line, yeah, and a better road, the bypass, because all of those things have a bearing on the sustainability of Nelson. So, if we treat Nelson just as an island that nothing impacts on it, then I think then we again limit our opportunities as part of a strategic offer rather than just looking at it as this little bit of the world that it doesn't have an impact or is not impacted by something else. So it's seeing it in that broader context. I'm not saying we would make any advantage out of it, but I don't want to limit our opportunities with it. So don't get, the money is for Nelson. Yeah, that's what it's about. But if the case is better by including those, then we've got the opportunity by having a ring that's that big, rather than narrowing it down to a very small area.
Thank you.
You okay with that, Nadeem? Okay. I've got David Clegg, who's indicated to speak. David?
Yeah, thank you, Iqbal. I'm actually looking at this from a different angle to where Nadeem's come from, but I fully see where Nadeem's coming from with the comments he's made. But looking at it from a different angle and looking at it from the angle of Colne itself, Colne has quite, compared to some other areas, it's got quite a vibrant town centre at the moment. And traditionally, in the past, we have had to be very careful with some of the planning applications around particularly on the retail park part of White Walls. We've had to be very careful what we allowed on there because it can and does have a detrimental effect on the town centre. And a significant amount of the White Walls estate that we are talking about adding here to it is actually retail park and could in years to come have a severe detrimental effect on the town centre. Now what I would like to do, Chairman, if you are minded, and I'm saying if you are, but if you are minded to approve this and include the White Walls estate in the area on the map, I would like you to consider adding some wording to it to protect Colne Town Centre a little bit. And what I would like to add to it, Chairman, and I'll read it out to you now, what I would like adding is, should any proposals be put forward for any part of the land at White Walls, then Colne Area Committee and Colne Bid would be consulted on it before the planning stage to help protect the viability of Colne Town Centre, and that the planning application for that part which is in Colne would come to the Colne Area Committee. And that's the only commitment I'm asking for, is for that to be added.
Okay, I mean, I don't foresee a problem with that, David, but what I'll do is report back to the Town Deal Board in terms of your comments. I mean, it would make sense for the money that's allocated for Nelson, as Dean has outlined, the money is for the Nelson Town Deal, but we've put in, we're looking to extend the boundaries simply to try and fulfil the needs of what government are trying to get us to do. But I don't have an issue with that, and I'll report that back to the Town Deal Board meeting, which I think is on the 31st of July. But for the purpose of this meeting, I don't have an issue with accepting that, David. I've got Sarah indicating to speak.
As another Colne councillor, I would just like to back David up. We tied ourselves in knots to stop duplication on that retail park for things you could do in Colne. We want to keep the reason to visit Colne, whether it's to have your shoes done or to buy flowers, current, because research shows once you visit a town for one thing, you're likely to say, well, we're here, we'll do. And we want to make sure that is in no way marred, and I'm sure the Cone bid would feel the same. So I would like to support David.
I think we may have lost Iqbal.
It's still on.
It's still on. It's muted. Just let me.
I'll just make a little contribution and stand by to take over the chairmanship if need be. But it was myself that suggested the extension of the boundaries in this direction, and it's not to the diminution of Colne, but I saw it as an opportunity of perhaps getting investment and recognising the jobs that are in that area. Yeah, I accept it's on the boundary between Colne and Nelson, but it's not to reduce the control or influence or the part that area of Colne takes in Colne's life. I think we have lost Iqbal, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, I think
okay. So the position as it stands is that's been moved. Councillor Clegg has made a suggestion of an addition there just to keep that on board. Can I ask if there's...
come in again, please? Sorry, I put my hand up.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Just a second.
I'm back.
All right, Iqbal's back. Yeah. So Nadeem is wanting to come back in.
Yeah, sure. Go on, Nadeem.
Yeah, I accept what Dean said, and I can really, I do genuinely understand some of the reasons which you put forward. I'm still not convinced it's the right thing to do. I don't think I know you're trying to maximise the potential funding. I don't believe that we're going to have enough money to go on. We're including Loamshire Industrial Estate in that as well, and I think that's where the focus should be, rather than extending it yet further.
Sorry, through you, Chairman. Of course, the decision on particular schemes is a matter for the Town Deal Board. It's not a matter for the Policy and Resources Committee necessarily. It's a matter of an agreement between the board and the government. So this is due, as I say, emphasise my point about making sure we have the possibility of opportunities, not necessarily having to use them. This is Nelson money, and there's enough schemes in Nelson. Trust me. And I think Councillor Clegg has said if we could get the same amount of money for Colne, I'll take it out of this one and put it in the Colne Town Deal. That'll be the next one, I think. So it'll be down to the Town Deal Board to agree to us. There isn't anything that I'm seeing at the moment.
Yeah, likewise, Nadeem, Loamshire Industrial Estate. Yeah, I mean, if you look at Loamshire Industrial Estate, for example, the whole of the estate's not even in Nelson, but as a Nelson council like you are, clearly we would think Loamshire Industrial Estate would make sense to put that within the Nelson Town Deal Board, but that falls ultimately within 3 area committee boundaries at one point in time. But I've got a recommendation with the addition of what Councillor Clegg has moved. Councillor Sakib, I think, seconded me. Jane, do you want to do the roll call then on this one?
Yes, I will do. This is all those who are in favour of the recommendations as set out with the addition of Councillor Clegg's suggestion. Please say for, and those against, please say against. Councillor Ahmed.
Abstain.
Councillor Aslam.
For.
Councillor Clegg.
For.
Councillor Coburn-Price.
For.
Councillor Cooney. Muted, Councillor Cooney.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Goldthorpe.
For.
Councillor Hanif.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal.
For.
Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
For.
Councillor Newman. Muted, Councillor Newman.
4.
Councillor Nixon.
4.
Councillor Sakib.
4.
Councillor Whip.
4.
Okay, that's carried.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jen. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, which is the Swan Place Corn surrender of lease. Dean, is there anything you want to add on this? Or are we...
No, I think the report's fairly self-explanatory. I mean, I think there's an opportunity here for us to take back control of the upper part of the market hall. It's key that we make Together Housing do what is suggested in the report in terms of the conditions, particularly acquiring the privately owned property, because what we don't want to do is take it back with one of the units occupied by a privately owned occupier. So we set out there the kind of conditions that we've tried to negotiate with Together Housing. And I think the discussions to date have been reasonably positive, that we brought it here for formal decision.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price indicating to speak. Sarah?
I think this is both marvellous and deeply worrying simultaneously, because we have a thing that's been a worry for a long time. In the report it says, you know, Pendle sold this one flat, so you've got a difference in ownership of the flats, which has put the position of the building in a great deal of uncertainty for a very long time. So if that could be solved, which the report seems to suggest, that Together Housing may be in a position to buy this back, that would be marvellous. So that's my good bit. My concern is how much this is against what Cone councillors, the neighbourhood plan, I'm the chairman of the neighbourhood plan working group, and also Cone Bid would feel about this as it stands, because the report seems to leave it as all the French windows are sorted out, all the staircases are sorted out, and the whole thing is mothballed. And I understand why the thing is mothballed. Together Housing feel they're not fit for purpose. Really, you could argue the entire building isn't fit for purpose, and it sits within the wider regeneration, redevelopment zone of Cone that's within the neighbourhood plan that was put there by Councillor Foxley. So what we're trying to do with the bid, with the neighbourhood plan, is to keep Cone sustainable and viable and safe. And we are doing everything we can to encourage people to come and live in the town centre. So it's normal to live in the town centre, just like we are developing now the former health centre, which is bringing flats into Cone. So it's a bit like giving with one hand and taking away with another. I would hate to see this building just mothballed, left alone, and we lose that vibrancy and residents living in the town. So I would like to ask this committee to say, in a few months' time, because I think it would be a lot of work, to come back to us with serious options that we could consider that could take this forward, so that accommodation, potentially rehousing of the market, could be fully considered, so that it's pro keeping Cone going. And remember, Cone is an actual medieval market town, so I'm very, very, very fond of keeping that market vibrant.
Okay, thanks for that, Sarah. I've got Johnny indicating to speak. Dean, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, Chairman, just in response to that, of course, the critical thing with all of these property-related matters is the council has control of it. And this is only the first step of gaining control of the entirety of the site, which we don't have at present. Of course, the things that you've talked about what does it look like in the future, yeah, those are things we're already thinking about. But of course, fundamentally, you can't do anything if you don't have any control over the site. So this is only the first step of it. And equally, the consideration of this site has to be done in the context of the entirety of the town centre. So again, all of those things are up for discussion, but you can't do any of that if you don't have control of it.
Okay, thanks for that, Dean. Johnny?
Thank you, Chair. I'd simply like to move the report as set out.
Thanks for that, Johnny. I'll second it from the chair. is everybody in favour? Is there anybody against what Councillor Johnny Nixon has moved? Sarah? You muted yourself, Sarah. I know it's difficult, but...
Could we please just have the rider that it would be brought back to P&R for discussion for the future in so many months' time? I would feel so much more confident if it wasn't just mothballing it.
Well, I think if we had something, and if Johnny's happy to accept that future updates are given at policy and resources, future policy meetings, I think that's the intention of officers anyway. Well, this, as Dina said, this is the first step, and no doubt we'll get, rather than tying officers down to say, look, we want to report in 2 months, we'll do it as and when is necessary, if that's okay.
Okay.
Chair?
Okay. Johnny?
Yeah, happy with that, Chair, but I'll just say to Sarah, I can't see it being mothballed for very long.
Okay, valid point.
Yes, happy with that, that's fine.
That's fine. I've got Nadeem indicating to speak.
Just a quick point following on from what Sarah said in terms of the timescale. I know Dean's saying it's going to be a long process. I think we understand that and appreciate that. But can I just ask a quick question? Because obviously people want to see progress. How soon are we likely to have a report back to P&R in terms of the options of moving forward?
Okay.
It's difficult to commit to a date on that because one, we've got to do the negotiations with Together Housing and conclude that there's clearly a private owner in one of these properties. That's got to be concluded. Any proposals around development, I think members are probably aware that we're trying to get money for master plans in town centres to try to master plan the town centres better. And we haven't got that money yet, so that's going to be crucial. And then, of course, delivery of anything requires money, and we haven't got any of that either. So it's a bit off. I don't want to be committed to a particular timescale because of all of those things. I just can't say, to be honest. Like I said, this is the first step. Once you get control, then inevitably you as councillors will be putting pressure on us to say, what are we doing with this thing? And, you know, I accept that, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But let's get control first.
Okay, I think if we bring a report to committee once we've got control, Dean, then we can have a general discussion of the way forward on that. People are happy. If everybody's happy with that, I'm competing with the call to prayer now. Just, if anybody's against, if you can indicate, please. No, I think everybody's happy. David, can you just take over this last 2 items? Because I don't know whether you can hear me. I'm going to compete with the call to prayer.
Okay. Right. I've got to find my agenda now.
Item 10.
Okay. A Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, our RIPA policy, and it's about updating our social media policy and making sure that we're in conformity with all the relevant legislation. It's an important issue, although I suspect it's not the subject of hot debate this afternoon. Is there anybody who wants to come in? Shall I just move this? Okay,
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah, it's moved and seconded. Anybody dissenting from that? Nope. Okay. We'll take that as approved. And then item 11 is tenders. We have.
I think Sakib needs to leave the meeting at this point, Jane. If you just
I'll leave the meeting. I'll leave the meeting now.
Okay, so we have got a report, and there are recommendations within it. Are we happy to accept those? I would move them.
Second that, Chair.
Moved and seconded. Is there anybody that wants to speak against this? I'll shut Iqbal up. Right. There's nobody indicating they want to speak against this, so I will take that as approved. Can I thank you all very much for coming along, including Iqbal?
Thank you all, and as you can see, so I'm starting to sweat now. It's about 37 degrees here. But you all take care and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.